Welcome to After the Vows, a podcast from Christ Community Chapel about the challenges that show up in marriage after the honeymoon ends. I'm Joe Coffey, and together with my wife Karen, we will gather in each episode with some friends just to talk about the real issues that happen in every marriage. I hope you'll join us. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of After the Vows. We are going to be talking about sexual intimacy. When intimacy feels out of sync. So if you're listening to this with children, I would just suggest that you pause it and then listen to it when the kids aren't around. All right, let me introduce our special guest. I'm super excited about having this guest with us. First, my co-host and lovely wife, Karen.
Hello.
But our special guest is Dr. Juli Slattery. Dr. Slattery is a clinical psychologist and author and speaker. She is also the president and co-founder of Authentic Intimacy, which is a ministry reclaiming God's design on sexuality. So, Juli, it's great to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Listen, my first question is this. What got you interested in... No, wait, before that. How long have you been married?
I've been married for about 31 years.
Okay. And I always ask each guest this. Was your first year of marriage easier or harder than you expected it to be?
Harder.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And when did it get, how long was it hard?
Until yesterday? No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I think it got much, much easier when we became empty nesters.
Okay.
Yeah. And then just progressively over time, I think even before that, just as my husband and I grew in the Lord and grew together, got help and counseling in different areas that were difficult, it got easier.
Okay, good. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what got you interested in this particular field of sexual intimacy?
I've been married 31 years. No, I know. Yeah, so my background is I'm a clinical psychologist, so did more general work in the beginning, and then really was passionate about marriage and family type issues and women's issues. And then around 2011, I just went through a season of my life where God really moved my heart to spend more time with Him and seek His face. And it was through that journey that He burdened me for sexuality and sexual brokenness, just being in the marriage and family space and feeling like in the church, we were just kind of dropping 30,000-foot care packages on this topic of, yeah, God's with you and you can do this. But in the trenches, there were just so many different issues that people were struggling with, whether it be pornography or questions about LGBT or betrayal, you name it,
right.
Abuse recovery. And so my heart was just really burdened for this topic, and I just started taking steps of obedience then, and here we are.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in my intro, I know that authentic intimacy is reclaiming God's design. In a nutshell,
yeah.
What do you think God's intent is for sex? Like, if I were to, I mean, you're not God, but if I were to ask God, why this? What's it supposed to do for a marriage for a couple?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think at a big picture, and we're not going to have time to unpack all this, but the big picture answer is that God created sex to reveal Himself. And people are like, wait, what? But all of creation reveals aspects of God's character. And God created male and female, the marriage covenant, and the act of sexual intimacy to show us what covenant is and what His covenant love is. So God has given sexual intimacy as a way that a husband and wife remember and seal their covenant. And so it's the bodily action of what you've promised to do with your whole life.
Right.
And it's multifaceted in that, but that's sort of the big picture.
Yeah, I remember hearing one of our professors saying that that sex was what worship should be. Mm-hmm. And we were in college, we were like, what?
Yeah.
And he was saying, it is losing yourself in the love of another under the safety of a promise of a covenant. And I thought,
That's beautiful.
yeah, it was so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now let me start at the beginning. Like if a couple that are raised in a Christian home, let's say they do things right. They're told it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong. You said I do. Have at it. Have you? How do people go from 0 to 60 like that? What would you say to a couple like that?
Yeah.
And
Well-
then I'm going to get into what the most common problems you find. I mean, I have a lot of questions.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's so much we could talk about with that. But one thing I would say is people will say, how do you flip a switch? How do you go from
Right.
no to yes? And I think what I've learned in my own marriage, as well as working with many others, is that you're actually turning a dial. And that the greatest sex was not meant to happen on your honeymoon.
Right.
And so I think a lot of it is expectations. Our culture talks about sex being all about chemistry and attraction and pleasure and immediately connecting. But I think that sets people up for the wrong framework of how you build a great sex life. So when you begin to think about we're building something and it's going to take time to build, there's all these different pieces involved that usually don't connect well in the first year of marriage. And so a lot of it is setting the right expectations and then giving couples sort of a trajectory of, okay, well, then what does it look like to build fun sex and pleasurable sex and healthy sex over the course of years?
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, that is really good. 'Cause I would assume that some people have, because they had high expectations and the first year was not great, then that has set the stage for them not to grow. I think it's great to say it builds over time because I feel like I always try to tell young couples that God made men into very simple sexual creatures, you know, but each woman is unique. And I feel like God gave me Karen to figure out the puzzle. And this is what I was telling that now we've been married 45 years. I feel like if I died today, she got married tomorrow, the next guy wouldn't have enough time to figure out what I figured out, which is such a great gift for me to go, oh, yeah, I know her better than anyone will ever possibly know her. She is mine alone to figure out. So
I love that.
But I
really
always
nice, isn't it?
It is,
I
yeah.
always tell men, though, if you treat your wife like she's as simple a sexual creature as you are, it's never going to be good.
Yeah.
Not for her.
Yes.
So.
Wow.
All right, Karen, I'm going to bring you in. What were your expectations going into marriage? Because I know you came in fairly naive and innocent. So
Yes, actually, my mom never had a sex talk with me, if you can imagine that. So I really, everything I know, I learned from you.
excellent.
So my expectations were low. All I knew was from TV
That you didn't have to say. You could have left that part out. But go ahead.
TV or movies. But I think my longing was just for intimacy and to be close to you.
All right. Juli, let me ask you this. What are the common issues that you find that couples are facing when it comes to intimacy and sex?
Boy, there are many, Joe, and some of it is just the complexity of the sexual relationship. You already mentioned that women are hard to figure out, and that is not just true for their husbands, but also a lot of women don't understand their own sexuality. And the research shows that most women don't reach their sexual prime until maybe their mid-30s. And that's because they have to get comfortable with their own bodies and their sexuality and communication and all of that. But then there's also complexities from our culture. Pornography is a huge one.
Right.
You know, the research shows that practically every couple at this point has been impacted by pornography, whether one of them is actively using or both of them are, or just kind of the the fallout from past pornography use. And pornography, boy, it rewires our sexual response in such a way that you can't enjoy normal sex with your spouse, but it also shapes the way we understand what sex is. It really trains you to think about sex as a consumer, even if that's your spouse.
Right. Which means that the pleasure is what is happening to you rather than the pleasure being in. I remember, I think Tim Keller said that the pleasure of sex is supposed to be the pleasure of giving pleasure, because that's the act of love.
Yeah.
But pornography, there's not another person
Yeah.
that you're giving to. It's all about, reversing the flow of love. There's something very,
Absolutely.
very selfish.
Yeah. One way that I like to explain it to couples is there's a difference between sexual activity and sexual intimacy. And so pornography trains us that it's all about what the body's doing, how the body looks, how the body's responding, and not the journey of sharing oneness, of communication and soul to soul, and learning unselfishness and listening,
Right.
responding to each other.
Yeah, I remember in school learning about how pornography, there's a thing called exhausting erotic potential, where you can show somebody, that's why you need new images all the time. But God created us to be able to have sex with the same person for an entire lifetime and have it be fulfilling and exciting and not exhaust the erotic potential. Is that when you talk about the difference between intimacy as opposed to the sexual kind of act, is that what you're talking about, that there's a deeper level?
Yeah, for sure there's a deeper level. Kind of to simplify something that's really complex, in one sense, we have two different kinds of sexual responses. One of them is a response to something new and exciting, which is what pornography provides us. And that releases a lot of dopamine and PEA, which has a really long name, but is sort of like almost like a cocaine kind of effect on our brain,
Right.
and adrenaline. And that creates this high. And pornography replicates that through always giving you new things, pushing the envelope. And God designed that to be sort of like the excitement of honeymoon sex, or when you go away for an anniversary and you just feast on lovemaking. But He also gave a married couple the gift of what we might call a normal sexual response, which is not necessarily fireworks, something new all the time, but it releases endorphins and oxytocin, which creates a sense of calm and well-being, as well as really connection and intimacy, where you just kind of look at each other and you're like, oh, that's my person. And it fights against betrayal and unfaithfulness. Like, there's all kinds of great stuff that happens when a couple just has sex, a couple times a week. It's not super exciting, but they're learning to communicate. They're learning to create safety within their relationship. And so what God has designed is the both and, that there are those times of intoxication together and excitement, but there's also many, many times of just, this is the way that we've learned to share and listen and love each other. And intimacy also includes the difficulties that you experience as a couple. Every couple is going to go through seasons where their desires are mismatched. They're going to go through grief together or loss. They're going to have to fight temptations, sometimes recover from a betrayal, or work through the impact of sexual trauma from the past. And if a couple's really thinking intimacy, each one of those situations provides an invitation to not just do something with our bodies, but to really share what sex means. And when do you feel ashamed? And where are your wounds? And how can I minister to you? And so over the course of years, a couple that will accept that invitation to intimacy is actually forging something incredibly deep.
Yeah, there are times where Karen and I have talked about it, where we feel disconnected, and it seems it doesn't seem like it's the right answer, but it is, that we need to connect physically and have physical intimacy and then we feel reconnected again. Some people wait. It seems like sometimes the tendency would be to wait until you feel connected and then have sex, but you need to have sex in order to feel connected.
Yeah.
There are two things that, you have to tell me whether I'm giving people good advice or bad advice. But I give young couples before they get married, I say, let me leave you with each a question to ask every once in a while. And I say to the man, every once in a while, you should ask your wife after sex, did you feel loved? And the woman, I'll say every once in a while, you should ask your husband, how are we doing to frequency? Just because those two things seem like the things that are when couples start missing. Like if I would talk to the average man, if we're sitting around a fire pit and we were being honest, and I said, so what's one thing you would change about sex? And most men would say, I'd have it more often. I don't know. I don't think women ever sit around a fire pit and ask, what would you change? But if they said, what would you change about sex? I think they would say, want to feel precious and loved and not used. So.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I would give the caveat that particularly within this younger generation, there are more marriages where the woman wants sex more often than the man does.
Okay.
So that's the case in maybe 30 to 40% of marriages now. Before it used to be maybe like 80% of marriages, the man would have the higher sex
Why has
drive.
that changed, do you think?
Oh, man, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think, first of all, in this generation, women have been encouraged more to explore their sexuality and to be free with their sexuality. So that might be, at some level, a positive thing. But I also think it's the impact of pornography on both men and women, that women's sexuality is awakened through pornography. But in a lot of cases, and this is true of Christian couples, a man will be so discipled in pornography that he either is looking at pornography instead of pursuing intimacy with his wife because, frankly, he doesn't know how to be aroused by her.
Right.
Or
wait, let me stop you there. That's such a strong phrase I've never heard before, that somebody is being discipled by pornography.
Yes.
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on thinking about like a woman who is just done with it and just says, okay, just get it over with. And coupling that with what you said about a 30-year-old who maybe hasn't explored her sexuality and doesn't know what is enjoyable.
Yeah.
How do you blend those two? How would you disciple a woman to enjoy?
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I really believe that we all need to be discipled in our sexuality because I don't think any of us are. We're discipled by the culture. And so whether it's the woman that doesn't know how to experience pleasure or it's, the woman who is married to a guy who doesn't want sex and she's wrestling with what's wrong with me, am I not enough? Like, I have a real passion for discipling couples because they don't know that these problems are normal and how to take steps forward. So in that particular situation, I would really want to understand what the barrier is. And there might be several. One could be, particularly if she grew up in a faith community, that she's always associated her body and sexuality with shame. And so all she ever knows is, I'm not supposed to want this. Men enjoy this, but I'm not supposed to. And so there might be some real lies that need to be brought out and addressed. The research shows that about 50% of women have experienced sexual violence. And so if that's part of her story, that's something that we need to talk through and that she needs healing from. It may be that her husband doesn't know how to awaken her sexually. As you mentioned earlier, Joe, men approach sex more simplistically. Their biology is more simplistic. Many men don't know how to be sensitive to their wife. They don't understand that their wife isn't aroused the same way they are. So sex can be physically painful for a woman in that situation. So there's all kinds of things that can get in the way.
How do you suggest for couples to talk about that? Because sex is always a difficult thing to,
Yeah.
and there is so much vulnerability in that. And I know for a man, it would feel like if he's asking a woman, his wife, how was it?
Yeah.
That seems like a super scary question,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But at some point, in order to get better at anything, somebody's got to tell you what's working, what's not
Sure.
working.
Yeah.
So do you have
Yeah.
tips about that? Asking for a friend.
No, there you go. And it's interesting you say that because, like sex is a reflection of some of our deeper needs. So even as you ask that question, how was that? Men are really trained to think about sex in terms of performance.
Right.
And I actually think that men are far more complex sexually than we give them credit for. I think there's a lot underneath that. And then women, as you mentioned, are very sensitive to, am I beautiful? Do you love me? Do you want me or are you objectifying me? So there are these really deep level issues that most couples have no idea how to approach. They think if I even bring this up, like I'm tiptoeing on a landmine and it's about ready to blow up in my face.
Right.
So I think one of the best ways to start, and this is what my husband and I learned to do, is get a good Christian book on sex and read it together out loud. Now, the reason you read it out loud is because you're practicing how you talk about sex.
Right.
And not just you read it and then I'll read it and we'll talk about it, but like when my husband and I have done this, we might read a few pages and I'll be like, wait, go back to that paragraph right there. That's how I feel. And so it's identifying and putting words to an experience that is very difficult for most of us to put words to.
Now, I know that if people are listening, they're thinking, what book did she, what book should we start with? I know you've written some books. And that was my thought before when you said that you have a passion to minister to couples like this, but there aren't enough Julies to go around. So I know we will give a list of the books that you've written. I know available to people. What book would you recommend that a couple reads out loud?
Yeah, if you wanted to read one that I wrote, the book God's Sex in Your Marriage is the one I'd recommend on that one. But I'd also recommend, I love Dr. Doug Rosenau's work. He wrote A Celebration of Sex. He also wrote A Celebration of Sex for Newlyweds. He wrote a version for couples over 50, but just good, solid biblical perspective. He was a sex therapist, so also gets into the detail of anatomy, how to work through barriers and difficulties. And I love it because he's not just scholarly, like he really teaches couples how to have fun. And he says you don't work at a better sex life, you have to learn to play at it. So he just, what he has written is just sort of a really great balance of all that.
Good.
Very good.
All right, like when couples start to struggle, well, in your experience, do people start to struggle early on, like in the first year, and then give up, or what happens?
Yeah, I really believe most couples struggle early on, but it's sometimes the low-grade struggle of we just don't know how to connect. They might just settle and say, I guess this is the best it's going to get because we don't know where to go for help. Or within those first years, something massive can come up, like a struggle with pornography.
Right.
And again, they don't know where to go for help. Or I think it's really common in today's day and age because we think about marriage so based on sexual chemistry that I just fell out of love or I'm not attracted to you anymore. And so that can create a real crisis of where do we go from here? This is the only way we know how to think about sex. And if those kinds of issues are addressed early, there are real tools to help couples work through it. But when that has been festering for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, kids get in the picture, there's no time and energy to really work on this, it really can become such an earthquake in marriage down the road that you don't know how to recover from it. But I will say, even in those situations, like God is the redeeming God. And in the work that I've been doing over these last 15 years, like the stories that I've seen of couples who have just, man, they had so much brokenness and they brought it to the Lord. They sought help. And many of those couples are just restored to a beautiful place today.
Is there a healthy amount of sex that is the average mean, what you would say in order for a marriage to be a healthy marriage? This is how much sex you ought to have.
Yeah, so the research, I'll go back to the research. It says that if a couple's having sex at least once a week, that seems to be a healthy amount. And the research also says that if you're having sex more often than that, there's not necessarily a benefit to your marriage, although whatever a couple enjoys is fine. Now, there's caveats there. If you have a marriage where there is not emotional safety, if there's any form of abuse, you do not solve that kind of problem through sex. So I want to make sure people hear that.
Right.
Also, I think that there are seasons where couples need to take a break from sex. And if there's that constant, we have to be doing this, sometimes they get in a rut of it's all about the activity. And in those kinds of situations, it would be like, let's say you are addressing a sexual addiction or pornography use. Sex isn't going to cure that. You really need to get help. If there is sexual trauma in the past for both the man or the woman, because men are sexually abused as well, sometimes the act of sex can be triggering. And so you really need to get help. If sex is painful in any way, and for about 70% of women, they experience some pain during sex at some point in their lives. If you continue to have sex when it's painful, you're teaching your body that this is a bad thing and something to be afraid of. So there's situations like that where, again, we have to shift to, although once a week or 2 or 3 times a week is a fine norm, there are seasons where you have to say, actually, let's work on building intimacy, even if that means we go through a period of time where we're not having sex.
And do you recommend, when you were talking about the pornography or trauma, that each person gets it separate, gets counseling separately and healing separately, or are they going to couples counseling?
Yeah, it really is dependent on the situation. I think probably in most cases, you'd want to get that individual help along with some couples counseling. And that could be with the same expert, or it could be, hey, you need to deal with this issue with pornography. But then we also need to bring that into marriage counseling of what does it look like for us to rebuild intimacy in a healthy way.
Juli, while you've been talking with couples, how do you deal with the mismatched sexual desire?
Yeah, first of all, it's very, very normal and common. Again, a lot of couples will freak out when it's like, oh no, we're not compatible. I think most couples aren't compatible. Like, you have to learn what it is to love each other. And so I think some of it is shifting the framework of what's the goal. We don't go into a Christian marriage in terms of, you need to meet all my needs. We go into a Christian marriage saying, God wants to use marriage to teach me to love well. And that's true in the sexual relationship as well. But something that is really practical that I think helps in that situation is understanding that there's different types of sexual desire. So there's initiating sexual desire, which means that individual is likely to think about sex throughout the day, look forward to having sex with their spouse, be the one that kind of prompts it. And the research shows that about 70% of men have initiating desire. And then there's another...
Wait, they want to be the initiator?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There was one time, if we could get back to that one time in our marriage, I remember telling Karen I wanted her to initiate, which is not in her personality very much. And she ended up saying, so you want to lead in every other area of our life, but in this life? And I was going, ooh, good one.
That was really good.
Well done.
I love that.
Checkmate. All right. So go ahead. So the men want to initiate?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. And remember, it's only 70% of men. So not all men. And then there's another kind of desire called receptive sexual desire. And it's still sexual desire, but it means that that person isn't thinking about sex, isn't always wanting it. But if it's suggested and the atmosphere is right, they can get into it. So I heard one person explain it like a sort of like Chinese food. There's some people who love Chinese food. They could get Chinese food every day and be happy. And there's other people, it's like, I wasn't really thinking about Chinese food, but
So that could be our code
That's
word.
funny.
Now
Yeah, but
I could
there
say,
you
Karen,
go.
what do you think about Chinese food?
There you
today?"
go.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so about 70% of women have receptive desire. So about 30% of women have initiating desire.
Okay.
And as men age, they tend to gear more towards receptive desire too, because their testosterone's getting lower, their oxytocin's getting higher. So this changes over time. But if you are the one with the initiating desire and you're married to someone with receptive desire, you think they never want sex because they don't initiate it. But it's learning to say, okay, my spouse does like sex and wants sex, but not just the way that I think about it. And so if you're married to somebody with receptive desire, it helps to use a code word to say
Right.
either we're scheduling it or can you think about it? Like, can we plan on this tomorrow? And the person with receptive desire then can start thinking about it and planning for it and can enjoy sex just as much as the initiator. So that can be a real
Right.
helpful language for couples to navigate what feels like a mismatched desire.
Yeah, is there a way to softly make that suggestion? I remember thinking how vulnerable it makes you to say, "Hey, do you want to have sex?"
Yeah.
And to have your wife go with you?
Oh,
Probably
yeah.
not. You know,
Yeah.
because you feel like you're putting
Sure.
yourself out there.
Hmm.
So I remember reading about a couple back in the day when you had twin beds, and he
Mhm.
would put his hat on her bed,
Yeah.
and that was because it seems like there's ways that couples try to communicate indirectly.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then if you think about the wife in that situation, if she has receptive desire, she doesn't want to reject her husband, but she doesn't want to right then. It's like, no, I was planning on doing laundry and I've got a million things going on in my mind and
Right.
I'm just not there. And so couples really can learn to use a system, whether it's we're going to schedule sex twice a week. Here's when we're going to have it. And then they both look forward to it and plan it. Or another way, this is actually what my husband and I have learned to do over time. He kind of puts something on my radar, and we have all different code words we've used over the years. And when he puts that on my radar, I know within about 24 hours, I'm going to initiate when I'm ready. And so that way it takes the pressure off him, it takes the pressure off me. And so there's ways like that, again, once you learn to communicate and you're not shaming each other for being different, you can really just find a rhythm that works for both of you.
I had a friend who used to wear certain earrings
Yeah, I love
as
that.
her hat on the bed.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really
All right. So you have a lot of people who've listened to this, I think, pretty intently. Where would you tell somebody to start?
Mm.
Like if they're saying, yeah, we are struggling
Mhm.
and have struggled, and I know there are a lot of different possibilities and possible reasons,
Mhm.
but they want to start
Yeah.
the process
Mhm.
today. What do
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah, this might throw you a little bit for a loop, but start by praying together about it.
Mm.
Like, I think Christian married couples are comfortable praying about everything except for their sex life. But recognizing, boy, have I learned this in the last 15 years, sex is a spiritual battle. And it's not just out there in our culture, it is in our own marriages. And recognizing that God put us together and he said, what God puts together, let no one tear apart. And Satan wants to use sex to divide you. God created it to unite you. And so it doesn't have to be a formal, fancy prayer, but even just saying, God, help us. Show us how to love each other well. And then there are just tons of resources out there these days that give you tools, like the books we mentioned, or we have a podcast on our website called Job with Juli. There's ministries that can help with pornography struggle or counseling. But just be courageous enough to fight for this. And it's not just fighting for it because you want to have a great sex life. There's nothing wrong with that. But fighting for it because this is a spiritual battle.
Right.
And sex will not be a neutral issue in your marriage. It's either going to unite you or it's going to divide you.
Oh, wow. That's very powerful. Now, I know you've written a number of books, and I know you didn't ask me to hawk this book, but you did bring it in. It's your most recent book. It's called Surrender Sexuality, How Knowing Jesus Changes Everything. So what are the other books that you've written?
Yeah, the one I mentioned, God, Sex, in Your Marriage, Rethinking Sexuality. There's a lot of them. So there's Her Freedom Journey for women who struggle with pornography, just finding the hero in your husband.
Pulling back the shades.
Pulling back the shades, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How is this book different?
Yeah, this book, really, my heart in this book is most Christians, we recognize that knowing Jesus means that we live for him and that he invades every part of our life, that he changes us. But with sexuality, a lot of Christians don't know how to do that. They kind of live compartmentalized lives, whether it's, I really have a question about the goodness of God related to this, or I have wounds from the past that I've really never reconciled, or I have a sin struggle that causes me so much shame. I just can't even believe that Jesus loves me. And so this book is really a discipleship journey of what does it look like to integrate who Jesus is into our sexuality. And so it's really for anyone who wants to follow Jesus and is wrestling with something related to sexuality.
Boy, and I'm still stuck on everyone is discipled into sexuality by someone.
Yeah.
Right? It should be Jesus. So, Juli, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks. We're so grateful for your ministry and all that you've done, and look forward to the next time we get to be together.
Well, thank you. I'm thankful for you and thankful to be able to share this with you today.
Thanks.
Thank you, Juli.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of After the Vows. If this hit close to home and you want to know what your next step could be, your next step could be just a conversation. We always think that it's good for you to connect with somebody who might have a little more experience, a little more insight. So we've set up marriage coaches, and there's no curriculum or anything, and there's no long-term commitment. It could be just one meeting, could be a couple of meetings, but you can sign up for that. That would be great. Another possibility is if you want to grow spiritually or through your marriage, there are other episodes of this podcast or other podcasts that you can access through our YouTube channel or our church app. But you're welcome to access all of those. But we're so glad you joined us for this episode.